Welcome back, everybody. In today's video, we're breaking down who is most likely to be the tight end one for us in fantasy in 2025. I have three candidates that I think are kind of in their own S tier in terms of likelihood, that being Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, and George Kittle. I'm going to break down their situation, some of their advanced stats, their deployment, break down some film on each of them, and then come to a conclusion as to who I think is the most likely to be the actual tight end one. You may agree or disagree. Let me know below in the comment section who you think is going to be the tight end one this year. Once again, please feel free to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. Let's get into it. The first tight end we're going to break down is Trey McBride of the Arizona Cardinals. So he's 25 and a half years old, smack dab in the prime of his career. Taking a look at his air yards, is 902 or second in the NFL with a 25.3% air yard share. That's the amount of yards traveled through the air for his targets throughout this past season, which is interesting because his 6.1 ADOT, average depth of target, was 21st in the NFL among tight ends. This should tell you that he was targeted quite a bit if he had that many air yards with such a little ADOT. Now, his deep targets of 7 ranked 7th among tight ends, but really, when you think about it, 7 deep targets really isn't that much, although he can definitely win vertically, as I'm going to show you on film. Now, taking a look at his red zone targets, this is crucial because while, yes, he didn't end up with a lot of touchdowns this past season, he was getting fed the ball in the end zone quite a bit, at least they were trying to, and his 21 were second in the NFL. Now, taking a look at his total targets, which goes hand in hand with the air yards here, his 147 were second in the NFL to Brock Bowers, but Trey McBride did actually miss a game. Now, taking a look at his target share, his 29.3% was first among tight ends. Despite, them drafting Marvin Harrison Jr. 4th overall, he was the number one target distinctly. Now, his target rate of 31.1% is actually third among tight ends. So his target share, just the total amount of targets he had compared to the total targets thrown by Kyler Murray, is actually higher than the actual target rate, which is just, how often you're targeted when you're on the actual field. Now, taking a look at his snap share, his 90.7% was second. He is a do-it-all tight end. He can block. He can theoretically get a handoff, I guess, if he wanted to. And definitely good with the ball in his hands. But one thing I really like is if you look at his slot snaps, his 382 were first among tight ends. This speaks to his positional versatility because he definitely lines up in line, but he is an absolute menace in the slot. And that just allows for more versatility and ways to get you the ball in space. Now, taking a look at his receptions, his 111 were ranked second among tight ends. Once again, missed a game. His 1,146 receiving yards were second. Like I said, missed a game. But if you take a look at his yards after catch, this further supports that he is a great yards after catch specialist. His 513 yards were third among tight ends. Now, interestingly enough, his 269 unrealized air yards, meaning yards that just weren't completed for one reason or another, were 8th among tight ends. That's really not that many yards. I really think that kind of speaks to his low ADOT, easier to complete passes. Taking a look at his touchdowns, he had 4 total touchdowns on the season, which was 13th. He's really just not been a high-end touchdown scorer for us, but not for lack of them trying if you took a look at that 21 red zone targets, which were second among tight ends. I really think this is much more rather than him being deficient in the red zone. I think it's Kyler Murray and his inability to see, as well as him throwing some very errant passes to Trey McBride, and they're just missing him entirely, that led to such a low touchdown output for us. But if you take a look, his 15.6 fantasy points per game were second among tight ends. But if you take a look at his expected fantasy points per game, his 19.2 would have finished first. I really think that this is primarily driven by the lack of total touchdown scoring, which I really think it's bound to regress in a positive way. I really don't, with this kind of volume, if he gets anything close to this, I really don't see him having less than 5 receiving touchdowns this next season. I mean, he got really unlucky, man. Tackled at the one numerous times. Taking a look at his dominator rating, that's his market share of the total yards and touchdowns of the offense. His 20.4% was 9th, which is really driven down by the lack of touchdowns, not the total yardage. His juke rate of 8.9% was first among all tight ends. He is incredible with the ball in his hands. You're going to see something special he does against the Dolphins on film here in a little bit. And his explosive rating, which is receptions of more than 20 yards or rushes of more than 15, was 7th among tight ends. So he's an explosive guy, which is pretty incredible because he's doing that with such a low ADOT. Now, taking a look at his target accuracy, this is what really hurts him in the sense of just limiting the potential output that he could otherwise have with good quarterback play. If you take a look at his target accuracy, it was 33rd among tight ends. Not very good, but it didn't affect his yards per out run because his 2.42 were 5th among tight ends. That is a very impressive mark. Now, taking a look at his target quality rating, that kind of goes hand in hand with the target accuracy. The quality just wasn't very good. 27th among tight ends, which, considering he had, such a low ADOT, really speaks to Kyler, in my opinion. And his catchable target rate of 81% was 16th, so middle of the road among starting tight ends. Now, when we take a look at his athleticism, his 40-yard dash time of 4.61 is in the 90th percentile among tight ends, which gives him an 86th percentile speed score at 107.9, which is height and weight adjusted. That shows you that not only is he fast, he is really fast considering how big he is. Now, his burst score was in the 48th percentile, nothing special, and he has a 52nd percentile catch radius. Both of those are rather average. And so this guy is a very athletic tight end with a lot of positional versatility and receives a massive target share. He is the number one option on his team. Now, taking a look at his situation, obviously he still has Kyler Murray as his quarterback. With Kyler, he's really short. He is very scared of getting hit. And so a lot of times he just tries to get the ball out so he doesn't have to take a hit, which can be an issue when he just needs to stay in the pocket or stay put and try to get the ball out to his guys. I think it really lowers the ceiling of the entire offense for everyone involved. But you could definitely do worse because there are definitely less accurate quarterbacks. And in a way, it kind of does play into McBride's skill set that, he's kind of this low ADOT tight end that's available in the flats a lot of times. Definitely can hit you up the seams all over the field. Really, he's dangerous on crossers. But with Kyler Murray not really liking to read through his progressions, kind of getting antsy, it does lead to a lot more dump offs for Trey McBride. But I will argue that, especially with touchdown scoring, I would prefer it if he would just, stay in the pocket and take the hit. At running back, you have James Conner, a do-it-all running back who's seemingly just as good as he ever was still. Then you have Trey Benson backing him up. So they probably should have a pretty strong running game throughout the entirety of the season, which is going to help Trey McBride out for sure. Now, taking a look at their wide receiver core, they really didn't do anything. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a very good player, extremely underrated, one of the best man-beating wide receivers in the NFL already. He does everything exactly how you should do it. It's really a shame that he isn't an elite of the elite athletes, but, he's still technically sound and going to be a very productive wide receiver. But I really don't think that in this offense, which is more tight end centric under Drew Petzing, that Marvin Harrison is just going to overtake McBride. I definitely think that both can eat, though, especially if MHJ and Kyler can get on the same page. So I don't think that Marvin Harrison is really going to usurp Trey McBride, but I definitely think that he's going to get a little bit higher of a target share. But when we take a look at the rest of the offense, man, you have Michael Wilson. He's a fine number 2, nothing special, though. Greg Dortch is a slot-only guy. Zay Jones, Fehoko, Weaver. None of these guys strike fear, are really going to command any semblance of a target share, at least in comparison to McBride. And so as far as the tight ends behind him, you have Tip Reedman and Elijah Higgins. None of these guys are any semblance of a threat to Trey McBride. Taking a look at their target distribution this past season, Trey McBride finished with 147 targets. MHJ had 116, Michael Wilson had 71, and Connor had 55. So as you can see, this past season at least, Trey McBride was easily the number 1 target on this team. I really don't think that this is going to change anytime soon. And I do think that while Marvin Harrison probably closes the gap somewhat, I really just do not see him usurping Trey McBride in this offense. Now, taking a look at his health, in 2022, he played 16 games, but he was really, the backup tight end to Zach Ertz. So it wasn't really fair to him, but he played a full season in 2023. And, his tight end 7 finish was actually incredibly impressive and a lot better than what you might think just seeing a number 7 there, because he was only the starter for half the season. As soon as he became the starter for the Cardinals, he was the tight end 1 from that point in 2023 till the end. Then this past season, he did miss a game, and so I think that ended up making him the tight end 2, which is still incredibly impressive. But, it was a concussion. It wasn't one of these soft tissue injuries or anything that you really generally have to worry about unless, you're Tua or something. So as far as health is concerned, I haven't really seen anything that warrants real worry in terms of him being available and, leading to him having enough games played to actually end up as the tight end 1. And so in summary, I think that he is more than likely going to retain his role as the number 1 target on this team. We saw it with his target distribution. He still has Kyler Murray, who, while he definitely has his faults, it kind of can play to McBride's favor. And then with him not really missing any time with anything I would worry about, one-off concussion, I think he is a very strong contender to be the tight end one this season. All right, taking a look at our first Trey McBride clip here, he is going to be lined up in line right here. He is running a seam route. You're going to get some movement by the tight end here who's going to turn this into a wheel. The Packers are going to be in a cover 3 defense, so you're going to have your deep third, deep third, deep third. You're going to have your flat that follows with the motion over here, your flat right here, and then your 2 mid-zone defenders. And so what's going to happen is this cornerback is going to play too far upwards, and Trey McBride is going to smoke him into an opening here in the soft spot of the zone. And then watch what he does afterwards. So right here, you can see that he has found the hole in the zone. 25 up here is just nowhere to be found. He realizes much too late. McBride's wide open, catches it, turns upfield, barrels into a defender, and then it takes about 4 to 5 Packers defenders to stop him. And this is just one skill set that McBride brings. He brings great situational awareness, a good feel for zone coverage, and when he's open, he pays attention here to Kyler Murray to see if he's going to be able to hit him in stride or potentially set up some yak. The ball's a little bit, it's not even really late because Kyler Murray had to make sure that, he was actually going to have an opening to throw into. But I really like how McBride, once again, watch, he barrels straight into the defender to try to get additional yak. He is a very tough dude. Taking a look at the second play from Trey McBride, he's going to be matched up against the Dolphins here. So the Cardinals are going to be in 13 personnel, so 3 tight ends. You're going to have Trey McBride right here. What he's going to do is fake as though he's potentially blocking or at the very least running a shallow cross before heading directly upfield. What you're going to get from the Dolphins is cover 3, so you're going to have your 3 deep third defenders with your underneath guys. He is going to do such a good job of just kind of getting in the middle and really just acting as though he does at the very least have a chance to block before heading upfield, and watch the separation this creates. And so you'll see right here, heading straight for the linebacker, and then whoop, wide open. Gets it, has to turn around to catch it, mind you. Catches his balance, heads directly upfield, hurdles a guy, and then finally gets tackled. I mean, I cannot stress his yak ability enough. I mean, and this is, this was a catchable ball technically, but I mean, it's not as though this was perfectly timed in stride or anything and ahead of him. He had to work back, spin around to catch it, and still hurdles a dude and finally gets tackled for a gain of 30 plus yards. This guy is absolutely dominant, and he's crafty as he showed you when he was pretending to block and kind of getting in the line of sight as though he might have to worry about McBride, but then zipping right past him and then once again hurdling somebody. And taking a look at the final clip I'm going to show you here, we have McBride lined up as a split end, so not as an inline tight end. He does play in the slot plenty. I just wanted to show you something other than him being inline. So what you're going to get here is a mesh concept by the Cardinals. So you're going to have double shallow crosses here. And MHJ is going to serve as a bit of a screen for McBride underneath. What you're going to get from the Seahawks is cover 1 man. So you're going to have a center of the field player here, a deep center field safety here, and then you're going to have your man coverage throughout with this guy on the running back. And so what this is going to do is it's an effective man coverage beater because it's basically a rub route where you have your 2 guys almost running into each other, but potentially and a decent amount of the time creating defensive issues where defenders potentially run into each other or their path is obstructed. And so they kind of have to work around to get to their guy, which thus creates separation. So taking a look at McBride right here, he is going to actually have Reek Woolen on him, mind you. Pretty interesting. Speed is definitely in Reek's favor. But once again, he's going to smartly run this right by the middle linebacker here in this little hook zone, which is going to first of all get in the way of Woolen. But then once he does that, MHJ is also in the way to further make him cross this way. Now, MHJ might have been open too for a second because the safety he was covering him in man coverage has been obstructed as well. But you'll see that McBride is running wide open here. Kyler already has his arm cocked, and wham bam, thank you ma'am. Now he's going to put the ball out to the left, not high and tight, but high, I guess. And then he's just going to bully Reek Woolen for extra yardage here. It doesn't get quite as many as he did when he hurdled the guy a second ago, but this is just what McBride brings to the table. He's physical, he's versatile, he can be used basically, once again, with being versatile all over the line of scrimmage. He's dominant with the ball in his hands. He has a good feel for the soft spots and zone coverage, when to make himself available for the quarterback, and then he's a quick separator, and especially when they scheme it up for him like this. The second tight end we're going to talk about here is George Kittle of the San Francisco 49ers. So he's a little bit older. He's 31 years and 7 months old. So he's going to be 32 in a little less than half a year. And when we take a look at some of these counting stats, he did miss some games due to injury. And that's just kind of a thing that we've seen throughout his career. But boy, when he plays, does he put up numbers. Taking a look at his air yards, his 800 were fourth in the NFL at a 19.8% air yard share, which is also fourth. But his ADOT, his average depth of target of 8.5 yards, was third among tight ends. That means he's being targeted, on average, way deeper than most tight ends are. His 8 deep targets were fifth among tight ends. But when we take a look at his red zone targets, he was tied with Trey McBride with 21, with fewer games played, which was second among tight ends. So that means where it counts, where you're scoring touchdowns, he is being targeted heavily. Taking a look at his targets, his 94 were seventh among tight ends. Once again, that's a counting stat. He missed some time. But more importantly, his target share of 22% was sixth among tight ends, not nearly as elite as Trey McBride. And his target rate of 26.3% was 13th as well. So it is a better offense. I'll get into the personnel a little bit later, but it is something to note that the volume isn't quite as much there for him as it is with Trey McBride. We'll see about Brock Bowers in a little bit. His snap share of 86.3% was fifth, and his slot snaps of 167 were 23rd among tight ends. Now, he can do it for sure, but he's generally more often than not deployed as an inline tight end next to the tackle. Now, taking a look at his receptions, his 78 were fifth, his 1,106 receiving yards were third, but once again, time missed, which makes his yards after catch of 522, which were second, all the more impressive. Taking a look at his unrealized air yards, he was 13th with 216. With a lot of these tight ends, their passes are generally more catchable because they're oftentimes not as deep down the field as some of these other receivers are. And so also they're huge targets, so it's more difficult to miss them. But, I was kind of surprised when I saw the few amount of unrealized air yards. Somebody like Rome Odunze had over 1,000, for instance, if that tells you anything. Now, when we take a look at his total touchdowns of 8, which were second, that makes sense given that he had 21 red zone targets, which were also second. Unlike Trey McBride, who had the same amount of red zone targets, yet only had 4 total touchdowns, and that's not even receiving touchdowns with Trey McBride. Now, taking a look at his fantasy points per game, his 15.8 do squeak out a little bit ahead of Trey McBride for first, but his expected fantasy points per game of 14.4 were fifth. So Trey McBride, if he sees any positive touchdown regression that's meaningful, probably has a little bit of an edge here given his total target share. But when we take a look at his dominator rating, his 38.1% was first among all tight ends, is pretty substantially. That's his market share of the total yards and touchdowns of his offense. He is a dominant force. Now, his juke rate of 12.8% was actually higher than McBride's, but I suspect they just don't have enough of a sample size to give him a ranking here. But needless to say, and as you'll see, he is very good after the catch. He can make you miss, bowl through you, use blockers to his advantage, everything. Now, taking a look at his explosive rating, his 149 was first. That kind of goes hand in hand with the ADOT, the average depth of target, being third among tight ends. He is an explosive play waiting to happen. He is dangerous down the seams, dangerous on the crossers, the shallow crosses. You could have him run digs, corners, anything you want. It is all in his wheelhouse. And taking a look at his target accuracy, it's actually not the best, but decent. His 6.5 was 18th, and his yards per out run of 3.1 were good for first. So I think that just goes to show that when he plays, he's arguably the best tight end in the NFL. Taking a look at his target quality rating, his 6.24 were first among tight ends, so the target quality is good. And the catchable target rate of 88.3% were fourth among tight ends. So while his target accuracy was 18th, his target quality and catchable target rate were within the top 5 and first for target quality rating. So overall, I would say he's receiving pretty decent quarterback play. Now, taking a look at his athleticism, I will say this was a while ago. I don't think he's quite as athletic as he used to be, but he is still an insane athlete for a tight end. I mean, if you take a look here, his 40-yard dash time of 4.52 was 97th percentile, which height and weight adjusted is a 117.7 speed score, which is 96th percentile. His burst score of 127.3 was 91st percentile. His agility score of 10.83 is 99th percentile. And his 10.35 catch radius is 96th percentile. So across the board here, he is not only an elite athlete, he is top tier elite in terms of his athleticism. Now, taking a look at his situation, his quarterback in Brock Purdy, I think, is a very good quarterback. He often gets the knock of, oh, it's the 49ers, it's just the scheme. You have to be talented to actually execute the scheme and not get found out on film and schemed against. Trust me, Brock Purdy is a very good quarterback. Now, I like this because, if you have a tight end, you want the guy to be able to actually get him the football, right? But I will say, I like that he has Mac Jones as the backup. Brock Purdy has missed some time. It's just happened throughout his career. And Mac Jones, while definitely you wouldn't prefer him be your actual starter, he is more than capable of just force feeding the guy who's the best the football. We saw him do it with Brian Thomas, although he did miss him deep plenty of times. Brian Thomas ate, right? Now, when we take a look at the running game, Christian McCaffrey, while there is the chance that he bounces back and he's just an elite running back one, keep in mind that in 3 of the past 5 seasons, he has not played more than 7 games due to injury. I'm completely out on a 29-year-old running back who in 3 of the past 5 seasons has been undraftable, essentially. But behind him, he has Isaac Guerendo, who's more of your athlete than technically skilled at the running back position, but explosive nonetheless. And the running back 3, I actually think is supremely talented. I comped Jordan James to Aaron Jones. I think he's very good. So needless to say, they're going to have a strong run game unless all of them get hurt, kind of like what happened last year, to be honest with you. I don't know what it is with injuries and the 49ers, man. But regardless, when you take a look at their receiving core, it's pretty good. Yeah, Brandon Ayuk, who is one of the better X receivers in the NFL. Now, he's coming off the ACL tear. We'll see. He's probably going to be off to a slow start, probably miss some time at the beginning of the season. It might be a next year thing before he really gets back to form, if he ends up getting back to form. But needless to say, a very good receiver. Juwan Jennings is a solid receiver as well. We all know about his explosion in week 5, whenever that was. Overall, I think he's fine. I don't think he's anything special. Ricky Pearsall, though, is somebody, he was shot and was injured and missed some time and came back and definitely showed some flashes, especially towards the end of the season. I am hopeful for him. He's a first-round pick in 2024. But after that, Demarcus Robinson's kind of a red zone threat, and then, Cowing and the rest really just aren't threats to really do anything here. Then that leaves George Kittle. Farrell and Dwelly are no semblance of a threat to him in any way, shape, or form. And so there's definitely a lot of playmakers in this offense, but a lot of these guys miss time with injuries pretty regularly. So while I do think that it's reasonable to project that Kittle misses some time, I definitely think that he should see, more than likely at least, a lot of these guys missing time throughout various parts of the season based on what we've seen historically. Now, taking a look at their target data this past season, Juwan Jennings led the team with 113. This was because Brandon Ayuk, who only had 47, did miss a lot of the season, but he had a 24.2% target share, so he would have had a lot more targets. Kittle was second with 94 targets. His target share was 18.32%. Debo had 81. He's gone, so some vacated targets there. Ricky Pearsall with 46 and McCaffrey with 19. Once again, he missed some time with injury, but man, he almost had a 20% target share. So there's a lot of total competition there, but I really like for George Kittle that they dumped Debo Samuel. Brandon Ayuk's probably not going to play right away, and when he does come back, he might have some rust. And so it really just is Juwan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, and then maybe Christian McCaffrey to contend with, which if everything works out against him is definitely formidable in terms of target share. But he's proven time and time again that he doesn't necessarily need the highest volume to produce massive results, given that he's an extremely versatile weapon in this offense, great in the deep game, explosive play merchant. And so I really don't think that the target competition is going to prevent him from being a candidate to be the tight end 1. But I will say I don't like that there's so much of it. And so when you take a look at his games played, he's definitely missed some time throughout his career. In 2017, he missed 1 game. In 2018, he played a full 16. In 2019, he missed 2 games. In 2020, he only played an 8, season-ending injury there. 2021, he played 14. 2022, he played 15. 2023, he played 16, and this past season he played in 15 games. So you'll see a consistent theme that he's missed time essentially every single season of his NFL career. That's come to be expected at this point with him being a little bit older as well. But as you'll see, he's a regular top 5 finisher when he plays enough games. 2017, I'll throw that out because rookie season. And then in 2020, he missed half the season, so hard to fault him for not finishing higher there. 20 overall and only half a season played is pretty impressive. But nonetheless, this guy is a perennial contender to be a top 5 tight end, and I definitely think he's a credible threat to be the tight end 1 if he's healthy enough this season. And so here we have our first clip from George Kittle. So he, just like Trey McBride, is extremely versatile. And, it helps when you have somebody like Kyle Shanahan, who's just a fantastic head coach for scheming purposes. So he's actually going to be lined up in the backfield. He's going to go in motion, and he's going to run a little wheel. And what you're going to get from Brandon Ayuk here, who's in front of him, is a dig route. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to be in cover 2 man, and so you're going to have man here. You're going to have man on Kittle once he flips, and you're going to have your 2 deep half safeties here, although he's going to play pretty shallow. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to force the safety into a bind. He's either going to want to help on the dig route run by Brandon Ayuk, who is an incredibly talented route runner. So he's definitely a threat, or he's going to need to stay deep to contain the Kittle wheel route. Well, he's going to choose the dig. And one thing I want to mention here is Brandon Ayuk purposefully takes an outside release so that he can muddy up the space and make it extremely difficult for George Kittle's man to stay on him. So this is schemed purposefully. And so you'll see Kittle go in motion. Then you're going to see his man follow him. And you're going to see Ayuk take the outside leverage here on purpose. Then watch. It's going to kind of set up a little bit of a screen here, which it isn't, necessarily effective in so much as he runs into him or anything, but still gets a step on him and just burns him. Takes a second to get there, so he's unable to really get any yak. I promise you, George Kittle is incredible at yak, as you're going to see here in future clips. But yeah, extremely versatile, good ball tracking here. I love the outside leverage by Ayuk once again in the scheming. It allows Kittle to get a step, and then, yeah, it's a wrap. Taking a look at George Kittle right here, he's going to be lined up in line next to his offensive tackle. This is an interesting play from the 49ers. You're going to get juice check in motion before running a wheel. Then you're going to get your double crossers over the middle of the field. And this is going to distract the defense from what they're really intending to do, which is set up a screen for Kittle where they're going to get their offensive tackle and guard upfield to block for him. From the Bears' perspective, they are going to be running a nickel cover 3 blitz. So this guy's going to come off the edge, and man, it's a good thing that Grendo was paying attention, because if he was unobstructed to Brock Purdy was going to get absolutely crushed. And they're going to run a cover 3 look off of it where you have your 3 deep third defenders with your robber underneath and then your coverage right here. They're going to be completely occupied with these routes here, and watch what happens when you give George Kittle the ball in space with nobody in front of him. And so Juszczyk goes in motion. So you got Kittle. He's going to make an effort to obstruct the defensive end here and give his quarterback some time to hit him in the flat. Purdy knows exactly what's happening. So he gets him the ball, heads up field, follows his blocks, and eventually just runs out of real estate. But yeah, with Kittle, one thing, I hadn't really mentioned is he's a very good blocker as well. Trey McBride is, but I would definitely give the edge to Kittle, but for fantasy, we don't really care. But this is the kind of tight end you want. You want the huge dude who's versatile, can be schemed, vertical shots down the field, yak ability. You want all these things, toughness, physicality in general, obviously good hands. And George Kittle simply brings every single one of these things to the table. And in the final George Kittle clip I'm going to show you, he's lined up right here. He's going to be running what I believe was supposed to be a corner route. His route kind of gets interrupted. He has to improvise, run shallow a little bit before heading back to the corner. What you're going to get from the other receivers on this side is a speed out and a slant. This is going to be quite effective, A, because Kyle Shanahan is a great play caller, B, because the Patriots, while they do have some talent, were a little bit lacking on defense this past season, but it's also just they're going to be running a man blitz here, which I'll explain in a minute, but this is just not very effective for this kind of a play, especially when you can't communicate. And so you're going to get this guy and this guy blitzing along with everybody on the line. And so you're going to get a total of 6 rushers, and you're going to get straight up man coverage here. Now, the halfback is going to stay into block. So what's going to happen is this guy is going to end up, first of all, in his zone, but then end up double teaming Ayuk on the bottom of your screen. But then also, because the speed out is going to be heading to this side of the field, this outside cornerback here is going to take him. And so what should be happening is they should be switching potentially. But what's going to happen is both of these guys are going to try to take on George Kittle. They're still going to fail, and they're going to leave the slant completely wide open. Now, Purdy could have hit that for an easy walk-in touchdown. He still ends up, throwing it to Kittle, and for fantasy, we were pretty glad, obviously. But nonetheless, 2 people are open, but one was much more open. And so right here, the cornerback down at the bottom of your screen is going to head back and end up doubling Brandon Ayuk with this guy. Then this cornerback is going to take the speed out, leaving one of these 2 guys necessary to take the slant and then the other to take Kittle. So then George Kittle runs directly into this guy, and both of them were trying to take Kittle, thus leaving the slant wide open, and Purdy still has the ball in his hands. But he has plenty of faith in George Kittle, who is going to, after throwing that guy off of him, be wide open, bend his route upwards to match where Purdy's going, track the ball, catch it in coverage over really one, but there were 2 players coming right afterwards. Still incredible catch by George Kittle. Way to take out the other player's guy and still end up catching this ball and scoring a touchdown. And I think this just epitomizes George Kittle. Flexible, dependable, and just physically dominant. And I want to give a special shout out to my Patreon members. Thank you to Big Hunt, SP, Mage Jack, and Infamy MTG. If you would like to become a Patreon member, the link's going to be below in the comment section. There we're going to have weekly live streams where we go over, fantasy news, potential buy low candidates, sell high candidates, depending on the news. We're going to give you specific league-oriented roster construction with trade advice based on your specific league settings there. We're going to give you access to early videos. We're going to give you the ability to suggest videos as well. I made a private video for someone on Isaac Rendo, some of the pluses, minuses to his game, things to like, and specific price points to sell or buy for. You're also going to find that we are working on a model with predictive capability for running backs, quarterbacks, tight ends, and wide receivers based on a variety of specific metrics, minimums and maximums to be in an acceptable range for us in fantasy that will be predictive and lead us to being able to be more successful, we think, than the average person in determining which prospects based on these thresholds are likely to hit or unlikely to hit. And we're also going to be updating that each and every single year with the new prospects so that we can continuously have the best model possible. So once again, if you'd like to become a member, the link's going to be below in the comment section. Thanks. Moving on to the third and final tight end we're going to discuss is a serious contender to be the tight end 1. We have Brock Bowers of the Raiders. He's 22 years and 5 months old, so still very young, not even close to being in the prime of his career, which makes these numbers we're going to discuss terrifying if you do not own him in fantasy. His air yard share of 923 yards was first. His air yard share of 20.8% was third. Taking a look at his ADOT, his 6.0 was 24, suggesting that a lot of his targets were very short area targets, more than likely that allowed him to use his yak ability, which he possesses in spades, which I'll show you during the film breakdown part in a minute. But his deep targets of 12 were first among tight ends, suggesting that he received a ton of volume to have such a short ADOT, despite having the most deep targets in the NFL, and he is a dangerous threat vertically down the field. His red zone targets of 14 were 10th among tight ends. I really wish they would have gotten him more involved, but defenses sold out to make sure he did not do anything, especially after the departure of Devontae Adams. Now, taking a look at his targets, his 153 were first among tight ends. I do think if McBride had played a full season, he probably edges out Bowers, but for a rookie tight end, that's a ludicrous amount of targets. And his target share of 25.9% was second among tight ends, only behind Trey McBride. His target rate of 28.9% was eighth among tight ends. So definitely a very good target share and actively involved in this offense. His 86.3% was fourth among tight ends, so on the field quite a bit. And just like with Trey McBride, he had a ton of slot snaps. He is essentially one of the best big slot wide receivers when used that way in the NFL. And his 381 total slot snaps were second. So a lot of positional versatility, which I'll also show you on film in a minute. His 112 receptions were first among tight ends, uh, with the caveat of McBride missing one game, kind of, I think, affecting his total finish here, but still very impressive. His 1,194 receiving yards were first. His 596 yards after catch were also first, so first across the board in receptions, yards, and yards after catch. His 325 unrealized air yards were fourth, which kind of speaks to the quarterback play. His 5 total touchdowns were ninth. Once again, I really wish they would have gotten him more involved in the red zone. His 15.5 fantasy points per game were third among tight ends behind Kittle and McBride. But his expected fantasy points per game of 17.3 were third among tight ends. So I think quarterback play kind of played a role in him not achieving, the expected amount of fantasy points based on his volume. Taking a look at his dominator rating, though, his 27.8% is third. That's once again his market share of the offense in terms of yards and touchdowns. His juke rate of 6.8% was second among tight ends, only behind Trey McBride. And his explosive rating of 117.3 was second among tight ends. He, just like both of these other guys, is a big play threat waiting to happen. Now, taking a look at his target accuracy, his 6.9 was 10th among tight ends. I would argue that his target accuracy is a little bit higher because of his short ADOT, which really does help because the shorter the bass, the easier it is to complete. But that's not to take anything away because he is incredibly talented. His yards per route run of 2.25 were ninth among tight ends. I think that quarterback play kind of hindered that a little bit, and I definitely think that has a chance and probably will go way up with time. But if you take a look at his target quality rating, his 4.82 was 22nd in the NFL, which kind of goes to show, like I was saying, the quarterback play isn't great. With a catchable target rate of 79.7%, which was 19th. Now, when we take a look at his athleticism, his 96th percentile 40-yard dash time is incredibly impressive with a 93rd percentile speed score. This guy's an absolute freight train in the open field. Now, when we discuss Brock Bowers' situation, it is important because, with the Cardinals and the 49ers, the offensive coordinator, Kyle Shanahan's technically head coach, but he's going to be still the offensive coordinator essentially for the 49ers. And then Petting is still going to be the offensive coordinator for the Cardinals. Their situations in terms of who's calling the plays and the scheme isn't really going to be any different, in my opinion. But with Brock Bowers, it is going to be quite different. He now has Pete Carroll, who historically likes to run the ball as much as possible. So I do think that with them selecting Ashton Genty in the early part of the first round, as you can see at running back, I do think they're going to be a lot more run heavy than they were this past season. That is a potential ding to Brock Bowers, not that he's undeserving of targets, but that I think there might be a little bit less passing volume. Now, I think that some of that is going to be offset because I think Geno Smith is much better than Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew, who he primarily worked with for the majority of this past season. Geno Smith is a more than competent quarterback, a vet who knows how to get his guys the ball, keep the offense rolling. So I think it's a big quarterback upgrade, actually. But once again, I think Genty is going to receive a substantial amount of volume on the ground. I think he's going to get a decent amount of targets as well. So that I do think is a threat to his overall production from, a volume standpoint. They still have Jacoby Myers, who is a very talented, perennially underrated wide receiver, especially for fantasy. Trey Tucker is a nothing burger, in my opinion. I think Dante Thornton has the ability to be a very dangerous deep threat at the NFL level, but I don't think he's going to necessarily demand a ludicrous target share. But they also drafted Jack Besh in the second round. I think he's your long-term Jacoby Myers replacement. So I definitely think that there is some improved target competition in this offense. With Brock Bowers, though, he is by far the best tight end in this offense. Poor Michael Mayer, he was a lot of people's favorite tight end before the drafting of Brock Bowers in that offense. Never really was just given an opportunity to get anything going. And Ian Thomas is a nothing burger as well. I still think that Brock Bowers is the number one target in terms of who's going to receive the most amount of volume in the passing game. But I do think that with a little bit of a probable shift towards running the football, as well as added target competition in Jack Besh and Dante Thornton, along with them keeping, Jacoby Myers, that we might not see quite as much volume as we did this past season, but I could be wrong. Taking a look at the target distribution this past season, Brock Bowers led, obviously, with 153. Myers had 129, so Bowers was definitely the number one option in the offense. But Jacoby Myers was definitely targeted quite a bit as well. So it wasn't as much of a runaway as it was with somebody like Trey McBride, for instance. Trey Tucker also had 81. Madison Abdullah had 40s. So, they like to pass to the running back a lot, which is really just poor quarterback play, in my opinion. Devontae Adams, as you can see, was traded partway through the year. So that definitely helped out Brock Bowers for sure. Now, when we take a look at Brock Bowers' finish, this past season he was the tight end one, and he did play a full 17 games. He did have some injury history in college, but it didn't really follow him to the pros. I really don't think injuries are a thing to worry about. I think out of these three guys, Kittle is more so the guy you need to be worried about. And so once again, with Brock Bowers, I think he's still the most talented option in terms of the passing game, but I do think that this culture shift towards potentially running the ball quite a bit more with a little bit more target competition could potentially lower his volume. Taking a look at our first Brock Bowers clip, he's going to be lined up in the slot right here. He is running a seam route. The Ravens are going to be in quarters or cover 4 coverage, so you're going to get 4 quarter defenders here deep. Then you're going to get your flats and your hook zone here. And so it's eventually going to essentially turn into man coverage with the safety and Brock Bowers one-on-one, which is just never a good idea. Also, though, it's going to be a great example of improvisation. So Minshew's the quarterback, an improvising quarterback. So what he's going to do is roll out to the right. Brock Bowers, once he's kind of stalled down here, is going to notice this, though, and make himself available towards the middle of the field. Once again, a great example of improvisational ability by Brock Bowers. He has the speed here to threaten vertically. He can destroy you from underneath, too, though, make no mistake. So he runs his route, and he notices Minshew kind of heading up field here, and so he's going to do what good receivers do in scramble drill. Make yourself available, and the better if you can do it deep down the field. So notice how he comes to the football and attacks it instead of letting it come to him so that it could potentially be disrupted. But then also note, he turns directly upfield, says, "Get off me," and then it takes probably a good 6 Ravens, 5, 4 to stop him. Way too many, to be honest with you. And as a Ravens fan, that was extremely disappointing. But it just shows that he's intelligent. He has the speed to get it done, the improvisational ability. He knows instinctively what to do in scramble drill, attacks the football, comes back to it, heads directly upfield, and becomes an absolute yak menace. People want to talk about elite, or rather generational prospects. Brock Bowers was a truly generational prospect, and really the only thing you could say is a potential deficiency really is that he's just not, elite in size like Gronkowski was, but his other skills more than make up for it. In the second clip of Brock Bowers, he's going to be lined up at the top of your screen. He's going to go in motion and end up being on the slot here. He's going to help chip before running a little stop route right here. It's not the most complex of routes, but watch what he does after the catch. So you'll see he goes in motion, and then he's going to end up off the line of scrimmage on the other side. Now he's going to help chip, then just head, stop in the open space, square up for the football, get to him, and immediately heads upfield. And then he becomes an absolute freight train. You do not want anything to do with this. First guy missed, 26 here. Dante Jackson, if I remember correctly, yes. And then it took 2 guys to tackle this dude. Just like Trey McBride and George Kittle, he is every bit of physical. And just like a heat-seeking missile once he gets the ball in his hands. Immediately heads upfield, lowers his shoulders and pad level. Just incredible stuff. And I know we've been spoiled recently, but really, guys, historically with tight ends, especially rookie tight ends, you just do not see stuff like this from them. A lot of times, they have to essentially be an offensive lineman and a receiver. It's one of the most difficult positions to learn immediately in the NFL. And we get more of these pro-ready guys, it seems like every year now coming out of college. But Brock Bowers, man, is just a different level of special. And on this final play, you're going to get 13 personnel from the Raiders. So first of all, they're going to have this tight end head in motion and block. You're going to get Brock Bowers running a banana route where he fakes as though he's running inwards before heading out back to the corner. You're going to get a clear out route here as well to help him. What the Broncos are going to do here is run a man blitz, and so you're going to get everybody on the line here blitzing as well as the 2 linebackers underneath. And so theoretically, This guy would be in man coverage. PJ Locke is going to end up on man coverage with Brock Bowers, and then these guys would be on the tight ends. Now, the tight ends kind of stay into block, so they kind of just are in no man's land. First of all, I I would I c- I had to include this clip in his the film I was breaking down. Watch what Brock Bowers does. And so remember, he's going to be right here. So he gets off the line of scrimmage and then sells the inside, looks back for the football too, then heads around his guy. Minshew is in trouble, so he's already thrown this football, tracks the football, stops where he is, gets physical, and then bullies PJ Locke, snags the football, and does once again what good yak tight ends do, head upfield immediately, and then gets a very good block from Tucker. And yeah, he's a missile. He's absolutely gone. There's nothing you can do about it. This guy is a physical freak who is going to dominate the NFL for a very long time. I mean, and the ball skills, I cannot understate how much better he is than your average tight end immediately as a rookie. Easy touchdown. And so, after breaking down film, taking a look at advanced stats and the situations of these three tight ends, I personally think that Trey McBride is the most likely to finish as the tight end one this next season. So, with the volume, this past season, he was first in target share. I don't expect that to really change. I don't think he really loses out on many, if any, targets. I still think he's the number one option in Arizona. You know, with George Kittle, there's definitely the opportunity for a lot of the players and playmakers in that offense to have injuries. We've seen it time and time again, but it is a little bit more muddy, and he's more dependent on being efficient with his targets, which is generally a bad bet. However, with George Kittle, he's so good that it just has not mattered. And then with Brock Bowers, I do think that he potentially sees a little bit of a decrease in total volume with the added wide receiver competition there. And then with Ashton Genty and Pete Carroll there, I do think they want to run the football substantially more than they did this past season. Now, in terms of expected production, he was first this past season in expected points per game. I don't think that changes because, once again, they added no competition. They have the same coaching staff, Drew Petzing calling the plays, same quarterback. I don't see any reason for that to change. In terms of yards after catch, he was first in juke rate. You saw him hurdle that guy. He's incredible with the ball in his hands. He's a bowling ball. He's physical. He loves contact, but he can also run away from you. Which, once again, yak is just something where, it helps you so much because you're only going to be given so much volume. So if you can make bigger things out of what you're given, that's just the best way to produce more fantasy points. Now, red zone targets. While, yes, he did not have many receiving touchdowns, he was second in terms of total red zone targets. He's due for some positive regression. He may never be a dominant Gronk-like touchdown scorer. Probably not going to happen as much as, or as great as that would be. But he gets the actual volume. If you don't get the volume, you're never going to score that many touchdowns unless you just have a randomly hyper-efficient season, which isn't sustainable. And the final point I want to make here is that he has the perfect quarterback for total volume. I say this because Kyler Murray, while he's definitely a threat to run the football himself, he doesn't really let longer developing plays play out because he's scared of getting hit. And so that was really to the detriment of Marvin Harrison Jr., but it was to the benefit of Trey McBride. He got so many dump offs because Kyler didn't let the play go through. And so that's just going to up his total volume. I really like this for Trey McBride because while, yes, Kyler being really short in the red zone does hinder his touchdown production, he should still get a ton of total volume. And so I think that all of these factors put together are why I think Trey McBride is the most likely candidate to end up being the tight end one for us in 2025 fantasy football. But what do you guys think? Do you disagree with any of my points made regarding George Kittle, Brock Bowers, or even Trey McBride? Who is your personal favorite to be the tight end one this season? Let me know below in the comment section. Once again, I am unable to collect revenue from these videos because I make a lot of film breakdowns and it's not loved, let's put it that way. So if you would like to, I would really appreciate it if you would support me via Patreon. If not, if you could just give this video a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be awesome of you. I really appreciate your support. Thank you and have a good day.